What's up, everybody? Welcome back in. It's another edition of the First and Orange podcast, Monday debrief edition, week 2. Luca, you looked up the term leverage as it pertained to the NFL and field goals on Sunday night, as did a lot of us. What a finish! It was a wild one for sure at Lucas Oil Stadium.
Yeah, not exactly. I wasn't there. Working remote, but not exactly the way that I had planned or expected to spend my Sunday night, for sure. Just kind of scouring the NFL rule book for the correct definition. But yeah, I think I tweeted a screenshot of it, but I think the real only possible way to describe that game is just the broadcast showing Bo Nix's face, where he looks, there's a certain vacancy in his eyes that you can only achieve with an ending like that. So
yeah, it looked like he was going to yak while they were setting up the 45-yarder after the penalty. Yeah.
Yep. Yes, it did. Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, you know what's interesting about it, and obviously we'll get into the field goal and kind of like how that all unfolded, the penalty on DeAndre Tillman and then obviously the Broncos losing 29-28, dropping to 1-1. I kept thinking, Luca, I was sitting there, that you're in like low Earth orbit in the press box at Lucas Oil. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking down at I'm watching them. Obviously, the defense didn't play great for a big swath of the game. They were good in the red zone. And otherwise, like they gave up 4 plays of 40-plus yards. Indy didn't punt. And the thing that I kept thinking when the Broncos were leading in the fourth quarter was, man, if they get out of this game with a win, I think we're going to look back on this one as a really good win. Like that's what I kept thinking. Like Indy looks legit. They've got some players on defense, even with 2 cornerbacks out. Their offense is good. Like Daniel Jones, I don't know if he'll play like this all year, obviously, but they've got real weapons. I mean, like their receivers are good. They're fast. They're problematic. They're like versatile. They complement each other well. Tyler Warren is a dude already. Jonathan Taylor's one of the best backs in the league. The offensive line, like Quentin Nelson, one of the best in the business. Plus, they've upgraded. So, like, across the board, you just sort of look at it, and I knew they were good. I think we talked about it being, tough, obviously, and all of that. And I was watching them and thinking, like, man, this team is legit. It was not just the Dolphins, being really bad in week 1. And so I was thinking, like, man, you're in position to win this game, road win against this team. We're going to look back on this in December and say that's a really good one. Now, obviously, that conversation's a lot different. It may ultimately be a loss to a fellow playoff contender that really matters in terms of tiebreakers, seeding, and whatever. And certainly the way in which the Broncos lost, even if the players do a good job of brushing it off quickly, is going to sting Broncos fans in particular. And I think also Sean Payton for quite a while.
Yeah, I think. And so we're doing this 2-3 hours after, Sean Payton's conference call with reporters today. And, Sean, very clear, like took accountability for the call on the 60-yard field goal. Like the one thing that he said is, stuck with him on the plane is why do we make that call, on a 60-yard attempt, as opposed to normally, when you would do it on a chip shot or that sort of thing. Obviously, took accountability, didn't contest the penalty at all. But looking back, and I think there's a few pieces certainly that you can put together here, but obviously you were in the locker room hearing about, DeAndre Tillman, his account of things. You saw it happen. Like, who do you put the blame on, at the end of the day for this, for something that, objectively, by all accounts, clearly didn't go right with that just field goal defense call, to get that leverage penalty.
Well, I think, and Sean did, I thought, a good job today. Not only did he sort of put it on his shoulders and take responsibility, but he gave us quite a bit of insight into what was supposed to happen and then ultimately what did. There's definitely some moving parts. So let me start by saying this. Like, I think that tactically on the play, just like responsibility wise, I don't think that you can get away from the play without saying that Tillman probably made a mistake he flip sides with Uwazurike right before the snap.
Yep.
And what Sean Payton said today was that Tillman and DJ Jones, who he was originally lined up next to, were supposed to work together. Jones, essentially, it's legal to push down the guard.
Yep.
It's not legal to push down the long snapper.
Yep.
So DJ Jones was going to push down the guard, and then Tillman would have, instead of having a defender there to, put his helmet in your chest if you try to leap up to block a kick, DJ Jones pushes down the guard, and then Tillman's got free reign to leap and try to block the kick.
And you can push down to jump. You can push down on a guy for someone else to get it, but you can't push down for yourself. You can't get self leverage, essentially.
Correct.
You can get leverage for someone else, but not, but not.
You also can't get leverage for another player on the long snapper.
Yep.
So that's the difference, is like it was set up to work on the guard, and that would be on the defense's right of the formation. It's the left guard. So when Tillman switched he and Uwazurike, it had the effect of him no longer being lined up next to DJ Jones, and thus like the whole thing was sort of thrown off in that way. And then he obviously, used his hand in a way that wasn't legal. So that's that. But the real answer is Sean Payton and Darren Rizzi. I mean, like, there's just no way around it. And Sean said it's not Darren's fault, it's my fault. That's all well and good. One of them, the special teams coordinator actually sending in the play call, or the head coach, has to look around and say, this guy cannot make a 60-yard field goal.
Yep.
He never has before. He's never even come close to it in college or the NFL. And if he makes, it's like, I wrote this last night, it's the equivalent of a guy fouling a basketball player who's heaving a 3/4 court shot at the buzzer when you're down by 2. It's like, if he makes it, you're going to have a pit in your stomach. Some little part of you is going to wish that you contested a little harder. But at the end of the day, you just say, boy, odds said he couldn't do that, and he got lucky and did. And man, that sucks. But the thing that you just cannot do is move the ball closer. And the only way to do that, obviously, was with penalties. So the thing is, like, they never had any business aggressively trying to block a kick that Spencer Schrader had a nice day. Nothing about anything that happened in the game or so far in his career suggests he could have made it from 60. And you saw the kick, and it was not close. So that to me is like, ultimately, Sean was right to shoulder a good amount of the blame, but I'm guessing Darren Rizzi talks on Thursday. I'm guessing he's not going to say, yeah, Sean was right, it's all his fault. Like, there's some situational awareness that, the head coach and the coordinator for that phase of the game failed in, and it just literally cost the Broncos the game.
And I'm seeing, of course, people are naturally, going ape on Darren Rizzi right now, as would be expected. I mean, I think that's, he's been in this league a long time. Like, he picked up interim head coaching. Dude, he's a guy that Sean Payton views as a future head coach in this league. Like, that can't happen in that situation. If, again, we're assuming that, and it seems like a lot of the responsibility falls on him here. I will say that, like, it did cost the Broncos a game. There is a decent amount of goodwill that he's built up. Like, we were all concerned about Jeremy Crawshaw for about 3 months there. And, Darren Rizzi implemented a new thing in practice, and all of a sudden he looks at Jeremy Crawshaw as one of the most stable things about the Broncos right now. So, like, this hurts. He deserves responsibility for that.
He also honestly, like, one of the things that they weren't very good at week 1 was kick coverage. Obviously, they gave up the big hit, the 71-yarder, and it was a lot better. Not only was it a lot better, but they netted, I think they gave up 1 to the 40, so that'd be -5, but they netted 25 yards of field position on kickoffs compared to just taking touchbacks. And so, like, they have, it's not that they haven't done good things in special teams this year. They definitely have done some. There's really sort of like 4 major errors. 2 of them, the no play is on one single player, but Will Lutz said the operation was great, and he just hit a bad kick last night. Mm-hmm. Marvin Mims maybe hasn't dropped a punt, like a clean punt that he was squared up under, like since he was in high school.
Yep.
And he just dropped one. Like those ones, you're not going to say like, hey, Darren Rizzi, what's wrong with you? Marvin Mims dropped a punt. Like there's individual accountability here. It's just the
total picture.
The total picture has really been up and down. You don't want big swings in your special teams game anyways. And then in this one in particular, I mean, it's not just an execution issue. It's not that somebody left a gap and then the guy ripped off a big kick return. It's that you shouldn't have been doing the thing that you called. That's really like the main issue here. And then Sean Payton said as much today.
I'm curious, like, and there may be no connection whatsoever to this year, but this is the second week in a row that we're sitting here and talking about, that was kind of a weird play call, in a really important moment of the game that almost or did shift things. Like obviously you had the, Sean's offensive, I think 4th and 8 call in week 1. And, I think like optically, if you zoom out and look at it, there's a theme of over aggressiveness here, like through, obviously that week. I think the week 1 call makes more sense in hindsight, obviously, than this did, certainly. But do you draw a connection there at all? Obviously Sean Payton is an aggressive guy, like by nature as a play caller. Do you think there's anything there? Is this just, hey, we're sitting here and it was just a bad call?
No, I think it's just a bad call because it wasn't because it, the 4th and 8, like if you gave Sean that scenario 1,000 times in that game situation, like he would have done it. He's really adamant about that. You can disagree with it. And I mean, I don't know. I might have kicked a field goal, but I really think I understand that it was unconventional. And it's not just because Cortland Sutton was running wide open, but I can understand the rationale in that. Like for some people, it might be a tick too aggressive or whatever. And it didn't work, obviously. And the defense had to bail him out in week 1. This is entirely different. This is like a immediate regret. Like,
why did we do that?
What are we doing? And also the thing about it too, that I'm a few times he has said, with the 4th and 8 call, for example, he said, we had 5 minutes to talk about it. We had plenty of time. There was a timeout. There was a commercial break, all this stuff. I don't necessarily disagree with the timeout usage that preceded the field goal attempt. He said you have to do that. They used all 3 timeouts to try to preserve some clock in case Indy did get into field goal range or obviously hit a big play and score a touchdown so you get the ball back. But it was interesting to me that, the butterfly effect of that then is you don't try to freeze a young kicker with a timeout because you don't have one. If you do and your guys gather up, do you say, whoa, wait a second, what are we doing putting a block on? Mm-hmm. And so there's some hindsight there. That's not the part of it that, that's not the part of it that makes it bad or anything. But that is one element of it that I think had there been a stoppage before the kick, somebody might have looked around and said, this is a bad idea. He can't make this kick. But without that, obviously, somebody still should have looked around and come to that conclusion.
Yeah, that just seems an operational oversight there. Well, it was really bad. And I think like in a vacuum, you just point at that and say this quite literally, like they would have won.
Right.
They would have won. So, but there's a lot that you kind of look at afterwards and you say, man, this did not, like, offense kind of collapsed at times in the 4th quarter. Defense got shredded at times throughout the game. What do you point at? Just let's say, leverage thing never happened. What do you point at as kind of the most glaring problems that Denver needs to clean up right now? Obviously, really, really big matchup in week 3 here.
Yeah, well, I think both the offense and defense will, and you saw this even last night in the locker room. I mean, they both shouldered their, leaders on sort of both sides of the ball in the locker room, said that they needed to be better. And that's true, honestly. I mean, that, I wrote the game story mostly about the offense because of the three. They had to come out, they get the ball to start the second half, they go right down the field and score to make it 28-20, and then their 3 drives after that ended punt, interception, missed field goal. Obviously, the missed field goal, that's not all on the offense, although they did stall out in scoring territory. So that's like, those are missed opportunities, and those are the sorts of opportunities as an offense you relish late in the game, chance to go down and put it to 2 scores. But listen, I mean, you can't walk away from this game without having at least a little bit of trepidation about sort of where they're at defensively. What's interesting, Luca, last year when they got shredded last year, like Baltimore, for example, Baltimore was a game where they just played different than they did the rest of the year because of Lamar Jackson, how dangerous he was. They played more zone. They struggled with angles and tackling in the middle of the field. And last night, it wasn't completely absent of that. But I think the thing is, Denver played the way and Vance played the way they like to play. A lot of pressure, a lot of 5-man, pressure and a lot of man behind it. And Indy just sort of beat them at their own game. And I think you sort of heard Zach Allen reference that earlier this afternoon in just saying that they played really well and they had a great plan. They got Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Warren primarily in spots where they like the matchup. And it was not many teams have lined up against Denver the last 2 years and said, we think our guys are better than your guys. And then that's proven to be true. But Indy did last night, and it was honestly, it was pretty impressive. Like they looked legit.
Yeah, and I think just if you think about defense as kind of this interwoven series of parts, which it is. Like Zach Allen said, "Hey, I'm not worried about the pass rush. We're gonna do our thing essentially." And Nick Benito still got a few pressures. They started to get home a little bit more kind of in the second half and throw Daniel Jones off. But especially in the first half, there was clean pockets all day. And I think that's why you kind of saw the receiver distribution for Indy was like, I think 6 or 7 guys got 4 more targets essentially. Yep. And that to me is indicative of, hey, Daniel Jones had time to work. He had time to go through his progressions. Like, that's why you saw, I'm going through Pat Surtain clips right now. Like, to Sean's point today, he was not, the Colts didn't go out and say, hey, we need to attack Pat Surtain. Like, he was the second read and just, he didn't have one of his better games. Like, guys got a step on him once or twice, and so you saw him get beat on slants a few times. But again, that's a result of, normally a lot of that gets covered up when you have guys bringing pressure and this or that. So, and then, I mean, we got to talk about the inside linebackers. It's not all on Alex Singleton and Justin Strnad by any means. Like, we were just talking about before we got on here, Jonathan Taylor, that 43-yard catch and run, like the Colts just schemed that really well. And Singleton got stuck coming over on Brandon Jones because Tyler Warren was coming through in the middle. So, just a lot of really good stuff that the Colts did. But you just cannot win football games when your inside linebackers are being, Colts targeted them 6 times, completed them 6 times. I think 120-plus yards from Daniel Jones on those plays. And when you look ahead to week 3, like this is the exact same thing that the Chargers did to them in week 16 last year. They were 9 for 9 when targeting their inside linebacker. So if Dre Greenlaw is not healthy, got a good sign that he was limited back at practice last week. If he's not healthy, like what does Denver do there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, one of the things I talked to Scout last year who during the season, who said that one of Vance Joseph's strengths actually is sort of navigating the inside linebacker position when you don't have, dynamic athletes, guys who like, Dre Greenlaw types when Dre Greenlaw is healthy. And so they've done at times, they've done a pretty good job. The thing about Indianapolis that I think will maybe go a little bit underappreciated is their ability to do both. Like they can run it and they can throw it. And so you have a better chance of holding up in that sort of scenario if you're not playing a team that runs the ball as effectively as the Colts did. This is not a new thing either. Last year, the most rushing yards the Broncos gave up in the regular season was 149, and it was against Indianapolis. And so it's 2 years in a row that the Colts have run the ball effectively against Denver, which is an issue in its own right.
Yep.
But the thing, I mean, it sounds obvious, Luca, but the offenses that are the most difficult to deal with are the ones that are balanced and that can do both, and that you cannot sort of sell out and say, okay, well, yeah, we don't like our matchups when our inside linebackers get on their running backs and tight ends, but we can just live in nickel and have, Jaquan McMillan or Jahdae Barron, or you play more dime and have both of those guys. And so one of the things that's going to be interesting is just how effectively, can the Chargers run the football. For a lot of years, that was an issue for them. Last year, not so much, obviously, with Dobbins now in Denver. This year, with Omarion Hampton and Najee Harris. So there's that. I think that the key is, can you stop the run? Can you sometimes stop the run with a lighter box? And then can you limit the number of times where, you've got those guys singled up in bad match. And look, like, there's not a ton of tight ends out there like Tyler Warren, and Omarion Hampton is going to be a really good player. He's not Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor on that 43-yarder, according to Next Gen Stats, hit the fastest speed of any ball carrier in the NFL in 5 years. So like, you're just not.
Yeah.
It's a different challenge. It's not that it's not a challenge. It will be. But it's a different challenge against the Chargers.
Yeah, and the Colts, I thought, did a really good job too of almost just using Tyler Warren as, like, the Broncos knew how much of a problem he was going to be, and they had Pat Surtain either shadow or tag over on him on so many plays. Like, again, going through and watching the film back, and that takes
third downs in particular.
And that takes away one of your best defensive weapons. And Tyler Warren, I think, only got only 4 catches. He was targeted a few times, wasn't targeted a lot. I think only twice when Surtain was on him, but there were a lot more plays when, and so, I thought that maybe Vance Joseph would turn more to Jahdae Barron and try and see how, kind of in that same role that Surtain was being used as, like, see how we match up with Tyler Warren and try and, shadow him a little bit there. Didn't end up happening much. I think Barron played about 16 snaps. But, I think I really think Indianapolis and Jim Bob Cooter really just kind of, as you mentioned, Parker, like, they beat Denver at their own game in a lot of respects. And it's crazy that we could be sitting here and still saying that, Broncos almost won this game. So, and
that's what, like, I think if you're looking for solace in it, it's that it took a freak thing happening. Now, they played with fire. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like, given how leaky the defense was the first half, giving up I can't even tell. I mean, last year Taylor had the 60-yard run that he dropped the ball at the goal line, 69 yards this year. There just haven't been that many big hits, but a lot of them, for some reason, have come against the Colts and the Jets. Like, there's a guy, you don't see the true home run, hit in the run game in the NFL all that often. And the Broncos have not been particularly susceptible to that, but Taylor's done it to him 2 years in a row. And Breece Hall did it a couple of years in a row too. So that's part of it. I mean, you obviously can't allow that to happen, but I think, like, if you are looking, a day after to spin this in some form of, like,
silver lining,
can you take away from it? It's that you didn't play well on defense. You petered out on offense late in the game, and yet you controlled the game, until the waning seconds, especially in the second half. So, I mean, that's, that doesn't, not going to change the record.
No.
But I don't think you watch that game and go, man, they have no chance against the Chargers. Man, I think they're, 7-10 instead of 10-7, 11-6. Like, I don't think it rattled them like that either. I mean, the Kansas City game last year rattled them. This one, I think, is a little bit different.
Yeah, I also think, like, you come away now. I don't know how happy this is going to make Broncos fans, but like defensively, what changes do you make? You don't. There's really not a lot. Like there's just there's some I'm sure miscommunication. I think mainly that kind of stuff is you clean that up film wise, but as far as like major philosophical schematic any of those kinds of changes, like what are you going to do? Put in like say, hey, Alex Singleton, you're not great in coverage right now. Let's start Lavelle Bailey and give him the green dot. This guy who's played 7 snaps in his NFL career. Like you're not going to do that against the Chargers if Dre Greenlaw's not there. You're not going to you're not going to change much with the pass rush. Like they just didn't get home as they just didn't have a great game by their stand. Like there's just not a lot I think that you come away with and go, wow, the world's on fire. We need to change everything. Like that's just not the situation here. I actually think there are more like broader scale issues with the offense, even though they played better than the defense in this game. So kind of a weird reversal on that. But I mean, to touch on there, I thought Bo Nix pretty, we all were saying it. He's very sharp, very, especially on the move, kind of a lot of the footwork or like off platform issues that we saw in week 1 looked like they got cleaned up. He had that one, I went back and I watched that 42-yarder to Troy Franklin. I was like, I still can't believe here's a screenshot and he's like, not to like demonstrate, but he's like fully like, it doesn't make sense how his body, and then he hit Troy Franklin literally doesn't even break stride. Obviously he had that one pick. Either it got tipped or a guy's hand was in his face. Just not a good play, not a good time. But, other than that, I thought he was pretty solid.
Yeah, and that's what I think after week 1, you were looking for signs, and we talked about Troy's column last week in terms of, is it time to worry about Bo Nix? Ask after this game. And after this game, you'd say the answer is no. And it looked good. They were in and out of the huddle, especially early in the game when they were in a good rhythm. They were in and out of the huddle a lot faster. Every time I looked, they were at the line of scrimmage, and he'd start changing the play. Normally when he steps toward the line of scrimmage, I do most plays, but always when he starts tinkering with something, I always look at the play clock to see where it's at. And it was like every time 12 seconds, 13 seconds left still before they had to snap the ball. And so the operation there just felt like it was a little crisper. Sean called a better game, I think. They established the run in a more meaningful way. They still didn't put up huge numbers, but they were more effective there. I am color me intrigued, I think, on the outside zone stuff, because some of it looked pretty good. They didn't get much done in that segment of their run game in week 1, but some of it looked pretty good yesterday, and that's going to depend on defensive front and what they think they can do and all that. It's not going to be I'll just be really surprised if we get to the end of the year and they're like, it's Shanahan-esque or whatever. But it fits Harvey for sure, and Dobbins has shown the ability, that sort of one cut and get up the field. It looks good on him too. So there's some stuff there, and then like Bo Nix, obviously the boot game, the play action, that all marries together. That's as Broncos fans who have been, if you've been watching since the Mike Shanahan days, for sure, that's a beautiful way to play offense, and to have the ability to do that offensively. So there's some stuff there that I think you could tell even among the bitter finish, some of the offensive linemen last night, you could see that little glimmer of like, we think we're onto something here. So I don't know. I think there's good stuff to work off of offensively. Just the cautionary tale is last year they were way too boom or bust. Scored a lot. They were 10th in scoring, but they were near the top of the league in 3-and-out rate too. And so you can't have those lulls like they had in the second half where you go a quarter and a half without scoring.
Yeah, and I think some of that is helped by, I think you started to see a little bit more, like we were talking about, what's their offensive identity after week 1, and we still don't exactly know, but I think you saw just a little bit clearer picture in terms of, J.K. Dobbins played really well as kind of the primary. Sean Payton doesn't like to have a bell cow, but, he was that kind of guy. Obviously took the first three, kind of opened and closed the game, which I think is a good sort of role for him. You had the occasional, RJ Harvey touch in there, or, you started to see him kind of spread his wings, the Joker wings a little bit, as a receiver at times. He's going to do more of that. And he wasn't effective on the ground, but Sean said, hey, we put him in some tougher looks in terms of, 11 personnel and this or that. So, those will probably start to click. And then you saw a lot less Tyler Bidet as compared to week one, which I think was, that's ultimately a good thing. Like you saw him kind of mix it up here and there in third down situations. He obviously had that one big 19-yard grab on a screen on like a 3rd and 15. So, I think sort of a clearer and more effective backfield utilization than we saw.
And Bidet's numbers are going to fluctuate week to week based on the 2-minute stuff. I think they had one quick 2-minute drive late in the half. Yesterday, but if you get a 12 play drive when you're in your sort of 2-minute package, then he's going to end up more on that, like he could end up with 18 or 20 snaps in a game when it's like this, where you're not chasing points at the end, obviously, because you led until there was zeros on the clock. And you have a quick drive early, then he's going to end up playing. So he's sort of like 3rd down in 2 minutes. So far, that's the way it's been.
I guess last thing there. What do you make of the receiver distribution so far? Troy Franklin's leap is, seems pretty legit. Like to me, and I just wrote a story on a lot of the kind of deceleration work that he did this offseason, which was sort of an emphasis from Sean Payton, but just the way that you see him take initial contact now, and it just kind of bounces off of him. Like there was one 9-yard grab he had where just kind of he absorbed contact, just stops, and then just kept going. Like he's so much stronger, and change of direction, change of speed, just look, kind of like a completely different player from last year. So I think that speaks to him. He's clearly, whatever you want to say about how Sean Payton views wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, like he's clearly the second option in some cases right now. Where does that leave Evan Engram? Because, a little bit confusing at the moment. He's had the calf injury, but he's only played, the snap percentage difference. He's been right around 70% throughout his career of offensive snaps, and he's at 40% essentially through 2 games in Denver. I think how we view it right now is, it's a concern. It's something to keep an eye on. It's not something to completely press the panic button on, because things could change in a heartbeat in the Sean Payton offense. But where do you sit on that?
Yeah, just that it's sort of interesting. And it's not the start I probably expected him to get off to. I do think, playing when you're talking about 8 quarters total, and you're talking about 1.5 directly impacted, limited to 1 snap because of the calf issue in the second half, week 1, and then a little bit, it wasn't he was a full participant late in the week in practice, but it was clearly something that got managed through the week. So I don't think there's enough data to really draw a conclusion from it yet, or conclusions from it yet. But I do think it's worth monitoring, certainly, like you said, going forward. It doesn't quite feel like they've got him unlocked yet. I mean, easy enough to say he has 4 catches and 6 targets through 2 games. The thing about it is Sean Payton just has too many ways to get guys like him the ball, and has too long a history of taking players like him and engineering productive seasons. So I don't think I'll just be really surprised if he's healthy for 16 games and ends up with 35 catches. Like I just don't think that's going to happen. But they do have other options, which is good. Like that part of it's a good thing, that you can throw the ball to Pat Bryant on 3rd and 6 and have him make, a man's catch in the middle of the field and be physical and get a first down although I'm not quite sure how that held up on review. But regardless, like he made a couple catches in traffic.
Yep.
Cortland Sutton only had one catch last night. That's atypical for him, obviously. They just have guys that they can get the ball to. And so that might keep Evan Engram from having a massive season. But there will be something else going on if 4 weeks from now we're still wondering why he's playing 35% of the snaps.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly with that. And yeah, I mean, I think Bo Nix said like he's the number one option on a lot of plays that they call, and it just didn't, you see it in terms of he's not like way far down on the chart in terms of, how many routes he's running on pass play snaps right now. Like he's right in the mix with their top guys. So either it's a chemistry thing that still needs to take time, or it's teams are obviously, I think the more likely answer right now is that teams kind of know that like he's not a guy who's going to be used much as a blocker right now. Like,
right.
And so I think it'll be interesting to see how the Broncos kind of adjust with that, use him with Adam Troutman, this or that, who's played 60% of snaps so far. So
there may be more. I mean, there might be some residual Nate Atkins influence there too when Atkins is back in terms of being able to play those two guys together.
Great point.
So there's that element of it. I'm not saying it's because of that at this point, but like that is one factor. And then the other thing is, Sean talks quite a bit about, the NFL season goes in sort of like 4-week revolutions as a general guide. And so you can also imagine teams looking at Sean's history and saying, we know they want to get that guy the ball. And at some point, if Troy Franklin keeps producing the way he is, teams are going to dedicate more resources to, trying to slow him down, or if Sutton gets untracked, so defense is always about deploying resources and how are you going to, handle different elements. And, part of it probably is defense is doing a pretty good job of handling Evan Engram, knowing that he's the primary a lot. Yep. So if other guys prove they can make plays, you have to disperse that a little bit. He ends up with more room. And then you sort of go the next, cycle around the wheel on that. So I think it's probably a little bit of a lot of things. And it's a fascinating one to sort of track over the next couple of weeks.
Agreed. We'll see.
There you go. We'll be back Friday. We'll see if it's a live chat or if it's a podcast, but one way or another, it was a brutal one for the Broncos Sunday night, 29-28 on the field goal miss. That wasn't the field goal make, that was leverage, all the rest. So we'll have it all covered for you the rest of the week, starting obviously Wednesday back over at the Broncos facility for the work week. So denverpost.com/Broncos for all the latest there. That's Luca. I'm Parker. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you on Friday.